your source for everything paranormal. Para-X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and blessed be, heed the words I call to thee. Honour the old ones in name and deed, hearken not to others' greed. Pray to the moon when she is round, luck with you shall then abound. Respect the earth, the sky, the sea, as you will it, so mote it be. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para-X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet once again, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. And the opening song was called Not As It Seems by Kevin MacLeod. And that's pretty much defining in the world of parapsychology. And my guest tonight is very adept at stirring the pots when they need to be stirred. And that's because it's part of the job description of a parapsychologist. Ciaran O'Keeffe is here, and he's dedicated to the investigation, dissemination, and discussion of issues within the field of parapsychology. He's been seen on National Geographic and the Discovery Channel, examining the use of psychics in criminal investigations and the role of infrasound in understanding haunting experiences. Some of you may have first become acquainted with him as the voice of reason on Most Haunted. And tonight we're going to be talking about parapsychology in general, but specifically about Ciaran's online School of Parapsychology. There's a lot going on there, a wide choice of classes and a great instructor. And with his mighty magic torch in hand, he illuminates the minds of curious pupils. Welcome back, my friend.
Hello, Marla. How are you?
I'm very, very good, and probably more wide awake than you are, but you get brownie points for this, for staying up. I appreciate that.
Well, like you're aware, even though it's 2 a.m. here in the UK, I'm quite used to these crazy hours, not because of necessarily ghost hunting, but because of having a number of children under the age of 4 and also a 1-year-old, so it means that I'm frequently up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning feeding them.
Which makes me feel less guilty, thank you.
Absolutely. Thought I'd make you feel better.
Phew, yeah, well, as we were just talking about before the show, we go back so far that, now we kind of even care if we hurt the other one's feelings, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it is. I think you used the phrase Skype-aversary. It's yes. In May, it would be 11 years that we've known each other. Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. May what? I mean, I might as well write it down with everybody else.
May the 5th. May the 5th was when we first made contact in 2008. And then it wasn't long after then that I first came onto your show.
Mm-hmm. And you don't rue the day, do you? Hopefully.
No, no, not at all. I remember it fondly, and I'm back, and I'm
Really?
back for more.
Oh, you're a glutton for punishment, but that's okay, because when you start talking about parapsychology and different things, you just kind of mess with my head a little bit. So then we're probably even.
I'm glad to hear it. Stirring the cauldron as always.
Yes, well, you're good at it too. I mean, birds of a feather. What can I tell you? But I was nosing around on the school's website, the School of Parapsychology, a couple of weeks ago, and it looks to me like the curriculum has grown. And one course totally caught my eye, and I'm sure you're going to figure that out in about 2 seconds. But we'll delve into the specifics in a bit. But if I'm not mistaken, the School of Parapsychology is many years old as well, isn't it? It's nothing new.
Yes, I think it probably goes back to easily 2008, and I would say maybe even a couple of years before that, in terms of when it was first set up, back when I was doing only 1 or 2 courses on the school, and I was based in France at the time and doing some work at the University of Toulouse. But yeah, the school has grown in terms of courses, very much led by, I think, what people are interested in and what I've been hearing about in terms of ghost hunters, various people who I know who are involved in the paranormal, and also kind of, I mean, you know what I'm like in terms of being skeptical about a lot of this stuff. Some of the courses have grown out of a desire to almost share the reality of some of these topics, where I see on the television or the media or other online course provisions that there's a very much a distortion of the facts. So I'm very keen to kind of set the record straight with some of these topics.
Well, and that's probably why you got the idea to create the school in the first place, isn't it?
Yes, actually, yeah, that's right. The initial idea actually came from people contacting me when I was involved in Most Haunted, and people knew me from that, and they would contact me and ask if there was any way of them studying parapsychology or studying ghost hunting online, and could I recommend anything. And I started to look around, and whilst there are 1 or 2, I guess some online courses, but more face-to-face stuff out there that I could recommend. So Lloyd Auerbach, for example, some of his work that he does with the Institute of Parapsychology or Rhine Research Centre and some other universities, and the Edinburgh courses as well. That was it. That was basically it. And there wasn't much in terms of online that I could recommend. And so that's how the school started. I thought, well, I'm an educator at heart. I am employed at a university, so why not set up, an online school and provide some of what people are interested in.
Yeah, and there's really a lot to choose from. But let me just ask this question, and the answer in my mind is probably, you're giggling. You know me too well. You see what's coming. Yeah. No, but it may not be. It might surprise you even more. I was guessing that perhaps if you had to choose a school's mascot, I think the Stay Puft Man would be it, right?
Yes, 100%. It would be it, yes. Stay Puft or even Slimer, but yeah, Stay Puft I think takes priority, given that I've had various travels with Stay Puft himself, but also he and the film that he featured in was the inspiration behind me even becoming a parapsychologist.
I was just going to have you explain why the Stay Puft Man and the Slimer are particularly you're fond of. So, yeah, that actually got you into parapsychology. Yes.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, it was 1984, so I don't want to reveal my age, but I'm about to. But I was 13 years old at the time, and it was that particular film that, I had been interested. I guess always been interested in spooky stories, and I'd been a voracious reader of ghost stories, M.R. James, Lovecraft, but also Clive Barker, Stephen King, even at a young age, to a worrying level that my parents were particularly concerned about my reading habits. But that kind of fascination, I guess, with ghosts and ghostly stories, reached its peak with seeing the film Ghostbusters and seeing these guys who called themselves parapsychologists strap on proton packs and go out and ghost hunt. And that really set me on a course to or a journey to try and do the same thing. And here I am decades later, and I've got a history of being a Ghostbuster, effectively. I've lived the dream, as it were, and still living the dream.
And I was going to say, still living, because it's going on. And you have a really great quote on your site, which reads in part, "This online institution provides a rare gateway to the scientific inquiry into a world seemingly without answers."
Yeah.
And that's very profound. And it also kind of intimates that there are actual scientific answers to be had, right?
Yes, yeah, and I think that's part of it, is that when people come on and they do some of the courses, they'll realise that there is, first of all, scientific inquiry into this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. People don't necessarily think that there is any scientific inquiry into ghost hunting. There is. Some of the other topics, I'm kind of stretching a bit the definition of parapsychology and the scientific inquiry bit. I think there's more in terms of, historical academic research into some of those topics, or anthropological research. But the scientific stuff, there are some answers. And it says a world seemingly without answers, because on the face of it, and I think a lot of what media represents, it gives the impression there aren't answers. And I would say there are lots of answers, but even those that have taken my courses or actually, get taught by me at the university, not just the School of Parapsychology, will know science doesn't have all the answers.
Mm-mm. But I've had guests on my show over the years that have talked about how the scientific community is indeed beginning to embrace the world of the paranormal. Yeah. And that's kind of hard to believe in a sense, because for a very, very long time there was this huge kerfuffle in the scientific community as to the validation of and the conflicting views regarding the paranormal in general.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the field of parapsychology, which is very much the scientific face of the paranormal and paranormal investigation and ghost investigation, but the scientific face of it in terms of scientific inquiry into some of this paranormal phenomena. Parapsychology has been very much seen as a fringe science for the longest time, from its early development in the 1930s, and then since then, and it's only really recently, I would say within the last decade, that it's reached a greater level of respectability, but also what you're getting more is a multidisciplinary approach to this stuff, or a multidisciplinary respect to this sort of stuff, which basically means that it's not just parapsychology that's looking at this phenomena. And whilst you and I would have been talking just over a decade ago about parapsychology being the scientific study of this stuff, now I can turn my students to papers that are written within history, kind of the academic study of history, within anthropology, within sociology, within physics, within biology, within evolutionary psychology, within neuropsychology, you name it. You can find, individuals within all of those areas looking at this phenomena and looking at it, but within their own discipline. And that, I think, is a fascinating development that's happened within the last decade.
What do you think started this development, this change to make it so much broader and so much more accepting? Because, I mean, let's face it, there are people in the paranormal community who look down on the scientific community because they're looked down upon by them. You know, I mean, there's never been a good handshaking agreement between either side. So is it because, do you think people are becoming more open-minded? The people that are talking on either side are becoming more credible?
I think it's tough. I think that there's a number of different things that have happened. So within the last decade, there have been a few instances of research papers that have been published within scientific journals and within mainstream scientific journals. So not parapsychology, but within mainstream scientific journals, actually tackling this sort of stuff. So tackling the paranormal. And even in instances where you don't get kind of positive results, you get kind of a negative result and then kind of a skeptical write-up of what happened. The fact that some of these journals have published this has kind of changed the scientific side of things. It's almost putting up a flag saying, look, if you want to look at this sort of stuff, it's no longer as fringe as it once was. It still is to a certain extent fringe, but it's not as fringe as it once was. And scientific journals and scientific inquiry is now open to you looking at this sort of stuff. So that's kind of a almost like a culture shift that has happened, I think, within science within the last decade or so. But that to an extent, why has that happened? I think potentially it's because of the explosion of interest in the field that you and I have witnessed and have been part of, that has happened in the media predominantly, so in television, but also has happened in film or in movies, but also has happened in terms of books and the internet, of course. But I think what may have happened a decade ago and longer would be that you do get this definite disparity, or there's this contradiction between the two areas, the popular approach to paranormal investigation and ghost investigation, which is very much distinct and separate from the scientific inquiry into this sort of stuff. And now, over the course of this decade, with an explosion of interest in this area, what you're getting is the blurred lines between the two. That you are getting examples out there in the popular press, in books, where you have individuals writing books that are for the popular market, but they're talking about the scientific inquiry. You are getting individuals that are doing paranormal investigations, that is televised, or they're putting their own stuff on YouTube or wherever they're putting it, on the internet, and there are essences of what they're doing where they are nodding to some of the early scientific research that's been done, or they're attempting to use a more scientific approach, and whilst it's not always scientific, it's at least been helping with that blurring of the lines and kind of moving it more towards kind of a scientific respectability, if that makes sense. So it's that blurring of the lines. But I think also, as scientists, it's arrogant of us anyway to ignore, what the public takes interest in, and especially when we're dealing with the paranormal, because it's about people's experiences. If we ignore that, then I think we're being arrogant, and even worse, if we ignore it and just dismiss it with a wave of the hand saying it's all delusion or fraud, it's arrogant of us to do that. And I think therefore there's been a bit of a wake up in science because of the explosion, because you can't look at anything now. The internet, the TV, movies, books, magazines, without seeing something about the paranormal. And so science and scientific individuals in their various disciplines have seen that and gone, well, this is interesting, let me now look at it from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. And, it's funny you use the word arrogant, because I think that the scientific community is not as stuffy and as scholarly sounding as they were in the past.
Thank you very much for not calling me stuffy anymore.
I've never called you stuffy. I've called you other things, but I have never called you stuffy. But there's a comment in chat that's also germane to this, that Cece said there are people in science who think normal psychology isn't a real science.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, and that has tarnished parapsychology to an extent, because parapsychology, or the vast majority of individuals coming into parapsychology, have come from a psychology background. So when you get, some of science not regarding psychology as a hard science, then go that next step to parapsychology, of course you've got, that they're tarnished with the same brush. But I think you're right, that stuffiness, that kind of, academics working in their white-coated ivory towers and not coming out of the offices or not coming out of the labs is a picture that is now completely changed. And it's completely changed, and maybe it's a wider issue than I, would have knowledge of. Maybe it is something wider around the accessibility of education. Maybe that's a feature of this as well, that, with more people going into higher education, maybe that's it. Maybe, it's become a more, more varied population in terms of those coming into higher education, and maybe that's helped with the change in how people see this stuff.
Well, that has, but it's also listening to people like you, and even Lloyd Auerbach. Okay, everybody thinks Lloyd is very proper and prim, and yet, say the word chocolate and he'll go on for hours because he's a chocolate aficionado. Now people that have listened that don't know a whole lot about you have heard that you're in this business, in teaching and interested because of Ghostbusters. I mean, how much more down to earth could that be? So, so you guys are also giving an impression that people have stepped down from their ivory towers, that you actually are human beings. You have senses of humor. There's a place for work, there's a place for play, and you meld it well. And people are hearing that because of the internet, because of other things that you do. And I think that plays in part too. And
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's a need for more of that. I was involved in a conference. I think it was maybe 2009, 2010, a psychical research conference, which of course psychical research was the forerunner, came before parapsychology and still exists to this day. But psychic research conference in which myself and a number of parapsychologists formed a panel at the conference, and it was an open admittance that what got us into this field was a boyhood fascination with ghost hunting. And that fascination, even for those parapsychologists who have now immerse themselves in laboratory research about predicting the future, for example, or about staring effects, or whatever aspect of parapsychology it is, there is still that boyhood fascination with ghost hunting. It's still there. It's still in our heart. That's what got us involved. And for some of us, like me, I still do that on a regular basis. I still go out and ghost hunt because I just love it.
That's it. When we do things, childhood things that we can grow into and are still in our hearts, we do it. Yeah. Lots of people have passing phases, and they lose it by the teenage years, or, for somebody telling them that, oh, that's not right, drop that or something. But if it's within ourselves, it's something that you never lose. And that is what makes it so good. I mean, that's what keeps us down to earth. I mean, I could have, I'm 5 years old and I'm reading books on witchcraft, and my grandmother's having fits. You talk about your parents worrying about you reading stuff. Here we go. But, most kids, they dream about witches and things like that. But by the time they're teenagers, they're off into something else unless they're trying to cast love spells or something. But then, if it's really in you, then you grow and you need to learn more about what that interest entails. And sometimes you're very surprised that it's not exactly what you thought, but it's even better. And so,
Yes, and I think that's a lovely way of putting it. And actually what you're seeing happening in a very public way is exactly that. You see publicly, because of people posting investigations or their thoughts, whether it's vlogs or whatever format, but you see people posting their thoughts and their journey in terms of looking at any aspect of the paranormal. They're posting it online through YouTube or streaming or any social media platforms, and so you can really get a sense, how exactly what you're talking about is developed over the course of people's research and investigation into this. That it's not unusual to find people being honest about their investigations and their paranormal investigation or ghost investigations, saying, yes, this was a fascination of mine when I was younger, and now I'm doing it. And they'll approach it in a particular way, but then over the course of a year, or sometimes for others it's months, a year, and then years, you'll see how they lose that fascination, but for the majority of them, it's about becoming more aware, reading about the subject, learning about the subject on the internet, learning about the subject from others as well, and they become more and more aware. And whereas in the past we didn't necessarily see that happening, we're seeing that now, that played out on the internet almost in real time. I can see it, I can rewind back a few years and look at particular groups that would post their investigations, and now look at them and I can see a change in their style of investigations, or I can see kind of a fracturing of the group into those that still approach it in a particular way and others that have gone down a more academic, maybe scientific route, or they've delved into other areas of the paranormal. It's just fascinating to see that happening live.
It's true. And the other thing, too, is having an open mind and not listening to people who tell you don't do this. And, along those lines, when I was looking at Amazon the other day, I noticed that you have written a couple of books with Billy Roberts, who the last one being Science and Seance, which was a discussion between a parapsychologist and a clairvoyant. You've always had an open mind about it. You just don't fall for, phonies and things like that. You speak up and say, wait a minute, I always call you the voice of reason on Most Haunted. But you have an open mind. And a lot of people on both ends now are being more open to this. So I think that's made a big difference as well, that people aren't just walking around with blinders on thinking that their way is the only way or the right way.
Yes, and the work that I've done with Billy Roberts is kind of illustrative of exactly, like you say, is my approach and my philosophy to this whole area. Is that in Billy you've got somebody that claims that they're a medium, that they can talk to spirit, and that is something that I don't do. I don't claim I can do it. I don't feel like I've got any sort of mediumistic or sensitive abilities at all. And whilst on the face of it, Billy and I, therefore, may appear to have very, very different perspectives on aspects of the paranormal, it would be wrong, if I'm immersed and fascinated by this area, to ignore what he has to say. And you're absolutely right. The internet is rife with people that are blinkered and that do ignore what others say and even become quite vitriolic and nasty about it. But the vast majority, especially within this field, I think, are recognizing very quickly that the blinkered view just it doesn't work. We all know that it's arrogant, and actually, by talking to people and by talking to people that have very different perspectives, different beliefs, different experiences, that itself is a learning experience. The same as reading a book, the same as doing your own research. By actually talking to people and being open to their perspective, and like you say, being open-minded to all the different perspectives, then absolutely, it's the way to go. And I think, it's also symptomatic of the way that parapsychology has changed, and you've got a kind of a similar field, which is transpersonal psychology, which is effectively looking at similar sort of phenomena that parapsychology looks at, but slightly wider in its remit. But it is effectively saying, when individuals like Billy Roberts, yourself, others, have paranormal experiences of any sort, it would be wrong of us to dismiss it or to try and explain it away. That actually, by people reporting it and people reporting what is quite, significant experiences, all we need to do is just study them as that person's significant experience. What is the impact on them? What influence has it had on their lives afterwards? What influence has it had on the people around them in terms of their interaction? All of that sort of stuff. So it's taking, then this is my favourite word, it's taking a more phenomenological approach in terms of understanding the experience, but not as explaining it. It's understanding the experience and almost recognizing and respecting that it's important for the individual.
That's the word. Respecting other people's beliefs is very key.
Yeah.
Because if you don't respect somebody else's beliefs and you try to put those of yours on them, you're going to spoil some people who will say, oh yeah, well maybe I'm wrong, because they're not sure of themselves. And that can be really difficult. I've heard 1,000 times from people, skeptics or cynics or whatever you want to call them, that witchcraft does not exist. And Wicca should not be a religion in the armed forces. And, there's no such thing as witchcraft and spell casting and intent and all that stuff. And, I know differently, but as a kid, if somebody probably tried to pound that into me, I'd say, oh, I made a mistake. It's not true. And then that would take a piece of me out of me. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's really important to respect what other people believe. You don't have to agree with it, but listen to it, because sometimes when you listen, you learn. And that's the key. Yeah.
Absolutely. And by talking to others and learning about other perspectives and other experiences, and like I said, it's learning, it's education, and you're becoming a far more sympathetic individual. Often people said to me, my many years involved in Most Haunted, did I change my beliefs at all, about ghosts and about haunting experiences generally? And my answer has always been no, not at all. But in fact, it's probably made me more sympathetic and empathic to people's experiences when they report them. 15, 20 years ago, I would have had a lot more of a skeptical response to people's experiences when they reported them, immediately thinking about the explanation for it. But actually now it's more about recognizing that, yes, potentially science has ways of explaining this, psychology has ways of explaining this, but actually it's recognizing the significance of the experience. But like I said, it's about being sympathetic to it. Some of these experiences that people are having, especially in a haunted environment, are exceptional. They are exceptional and they're significant. And have become a big fan of understanding and being sympathetic to people's exceptional human experiences, which is also a phrase that we've come to adopt within the last decade, more so I think within parapsychology. this idea that people have exceptional human experiences, and we just need to recognize that.
Right. That's important. Well, we're going to take a quick break, about 2 minutes. So if anybody wants to get up and run and jump and get something to drink or whatever, we'll be right back.
Don't go away. There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages.
Are you haunted by shadow people in the middle of the night?
Do you secretly love all things creepy and spooky, enjoying ghost stories and horror fiction from the best storytellers?
Do you have a true ghost experience you want to share, but no one will believe you?
If yes, listen to the professionals on What Are You Afraid of? Power Paranormal Show, Friday nights at 9 p.m. on Para X Radio and at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com.
What are you afraid of on Para X?
Our creepy and demented hosts are on call to provide you with all your spooky needs with true ghost stories, interviews, indie music, and new horror fiction. We are ready to scare you.
Para X.
From Haunted Road Media comes an exciting new novel by author Marla Brooks. Soul Connection, a deadly obsession. Two lost souls, ripped apart by murder in another century, find each other again in the present, only to discover that the murderer has followed them through time. Can their love save them, or will history repeat itself? Find out in this captivating new novel by Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, a deadly obsession. Available now on Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com.
Demons, vampires, werewolves, skinwalkers, all of this and more, Sunday nights at midnight on the Staring Into the Abyss radio show. Come, get lost with us.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
I swear it sounds like I'm going to war with that music, honestly. Maybe some days I am, but not today. My guest is Ciaran O'Keeffe, and we're very peaceful. And we're talking about parapsychology and the School of Parapsychology. And, you know, one thing I was thinking about when I was kind of thinking of questions and stuff, the whole concept of the show really shows that not everyone out there treats the school, sorry, not the show. Everyone out there treats the paranormal as a toy to play around with, that there are people who are truly interested in learning the fundamentals of a topic that is sometimes treated quite lightly. I think that's a big point that, you know, the light bulb went over my head. It's good that people aren't just out there for the fun of it. They really kind of believe this stuff is really happening.
Absolutely, and I think that does come from the experience, but it's that choice, isn't it? You kind of get involved in investigating, so ghost investigating, or you have an interest in the paranormal, and there's different ways that interest can go. The interest can either develop into actual investigations, but it could also develop into learning and education, you know, and whilst the school is is the online face of what I do, as well as my day-to-day work in the university, what you've got is a number of places now online where you can do you can take courses in this sort of stuff, where you can download information, you can download even academic articles on this sort of stuff, and the rate at which people are signing up to these courses, the rate at which certain academic articles on particular topics and also books on particular topics, are flying off the shelf, just shows that, people have become voracious learners in this sort of stuff. They just want to know more. Absolutely, and I think that's brilliant. And I think the internet has helped that to a great extent, a huge extent. I think people need to become. I'm always concerned, and I say this to my university students. I'm always concerned about the critical nature in which people lap up stuff that they see on the internet. That's the only kind of caveat I would have to all of this. So whilst we're seeing a lot of learning and excitement about the paranormal, the internet as a source for this sort of stuff means that you've got to be a bit careful, because some people can go onto the internet and they can take everything that's on there as being gospel, as being the truth and factual, and they just need to be a bit more critical. And actually, for your listeners, a good test is to check out my Wikipedia page as a good example of not to take everything as factual. If you look at my Wikipedia page, actually there's some stuff on there that is not true. Absolutely not true. So you just need to be wary sometimes of some of the stuff that you see. Yeah, absolutely. And, here's the other thing, the beauty of your school. I mean, unlike other online schools, you just don't scribble out notes and pass out assignments and remain behind the scenes. Lots of the classes have 2 lectures done by you every semester as well, and you are pretty much hands-on and face-in, as it were, aren't you? Absolutely, yes, absolutely. It's not just a case of downloading material and that's it, because I think as an educator anyway, being there involved in the course where even just in some of the short courses that really only cover 2 topics, to be able to be there twice over the course of that short course, more than anything, to consolidate the knowledge, to pick up on what people have learned, but actually it's to be there to answer questions, because again, it's about my perspective, but it's also presenting material so that I'm giving other people's perspectives as well. But I think it's really important that it's seen as, or any educational establishment, it's seen as a place where it's about imparting knowledge, but it's also about questioning what you see. So the same thing I said about being critical of what you find on the internet, to make myself publicly available on these courses live, albeit online, but live, so that people can actually question what they're being presented with, I think is really useful, and a really useful skill for people to learn, and vital to learning and vital to education. Yes, it is. I just looked at the chat room, and there's a question here. I think I missed part of the discussion, but it says, such as parapsychology and paraanthropology. Oh, yeah. Does he feel that paraanthropology is valid, and is he interested in it? He being you, of course. He being me. The simple answer to that question, which was a double-barreled question, is yes and yes. So to reiterate, do I think it's valid? Yes. Am I interested in it? Yes. It's not my area of expertise, but in terms of an anthropology kind of approach to the paranormal, so it's kind of in line with what you and I have been talking about for the last 30 to 40 minutes, is looking at paranormal experiences in a more social way, anthropological way, but a social way. It's about the recognizing people's experiences, their beliefs, their phenomena, but not taking a critical stance about it. It's just reporting on those experiences in a more open-minded, exploratory way. So the development of paraanthropology has even though it's existed for many years, it's more established as a subdiscipline, either of anthropology or parapsychology, however you want to look at it, within the last decade. And there are particular individuals, who have been quite instrumental in the development of it, and also people, even to type in anthropology into kind of a search engine, Google or whatever you use, type in anthropology, one of the first links that probably comes up is the journal that's available. There's a paraanthropology journal, which is totally free. It's an online journal that is full of articles written by academics, largely academics, but also those slightly outside of academia. But it's very much in the spirit of what the field is, which is, like I said, it's about an exploratory perspective. But by making it a free online journal, it's in the spirit of that endeavour, and it's just brilliant. There's some brilliant articles in there, so I encourage your listeners to head over to the Paraanthropology Journal when they get a moment.
Wow, that's good to know. I want to talk about the courses for just a little bit, because we're going to talk so much that we're going to run out of time, which is always a good thing, getting all that talk. But some of the courses, there is Foundations of Parapsychology, Intermediate and Advanced Parapsychology, Investigating Poltergeist, Electronic Voice Phenomenon, Introduction to the Paranormal. And then I think maybe these are the ones you've added, religious parapsychology courses like Deliver Us from Evil, which deals with exorcism and possession, and the Introduction to Demonology. And you also have the one that caught my eye, kind of under that religious thing, which is Introduction to Witchcraft. Yeah. And now I'm wondering if I need to sign up. Maybe there's things I need to know.
I can give you a freebie. You don't need to sign up at all, because it'll be interesting to get your perspective. But the development of this, that whole area, and I think, kind of the religious term that encapsulates that is probably not the best way of putting it, but it started out from religious parapsychology, which used to be known as Christian parapsychology, and Christian parapsychology was always the study of any parapsychological phenomena that occurred within a Christian context. So things like stigmata, exorcism, possession, but also reports of levitation, that sort of thing. And then partly, I guess, my involvement in the field, but also a number of others, we've kind of pushed for that term, Christian parapsychology, to change to religious parapsychology, where it's recognizing that the vast, the phenomena is not just a Christian, exclusively Christian scenario. It's many, many other religions. So that's why it's regarded religious parapsychology. And I've been fascinated and researching that area, largely to do with exorcisms and possessions now, for as long as I've been involved in parapsychology, and even from an early age as a teenager, fascinated by it. So the exorcism one was the first out of that grouping that I put on there, and basically it's tapping into the fascination with exorcisms and possessions, but it's giving lots of different perspectives. So within that course, which is about 5 weeks long, you get a historical perspective, you get a historical, which also gives you the perspective of different cultures and different religions. You also get a perspective which is the scientific one, what does science say is going on, but then also you get the perspective of the exorcists themselves. So you actually hear from a number of different exorcists about their perception of what's going on, and then you're presented with various cases, and it becomes a discussion about what do you think is going on, and as well as some of those cases being quite famous and quite well known, you also get a number of cases that you would never have heard of, and it's an attempt to try and explain it. So that's the exorcism one. The demonology one comes from myself recognizing over the last decade that there's been a growth of interest in this area, but also a growth in terms of the number of individuals claiming to be demonologists. And really, I wanted to set the record straight with that more than anything else, is that individuals claiming to be demonologists, effectively what they are doing, or what they claim to be doing, is walking into a location that is often the basis of a ghost investigation and saying that the thing or entity that's responsible for the phenomena is demonic. And that's what they're doing as demonologists. And actually the reality of the field of demonology is not that. Demonology is about having encyclopedic knowledge of demons, of the hierarchy of demons, the classifications of demons, the history of it. and it's such a huge multidisciplinary field that involves history, medicine, psychology, again, anthropology, to some extent parapsychology, but only a very, very minor part of it. But it's a huge field, and people are attracted to Intro to Demonology because of their fascination with these individuals that you see on TV programs, who claim that everything is a demon, but then they leave the course going, yeah, okay, there's so much more. And that ethos, that kind of focus, is why I created the history of the Introduction to Witchcraft course, because it's only a very short course. It's not my area of expertise, but I was very just conscious in some of the discussions that I was having with students that were talking about demonology, that they came to the course with quite a naive understanding of what demonology is, and in their discussions started to talk about witches, and there was a naivety around that, and a lot of the naivety stemmed a little bit from the naivety about the persecution of witches, hundreds of years ago, or the Salem witch hunts and that sort of thing, and
the burning
talking
times.
Exactly.
Back to 1400s,
There you go. And talking about, these individuals. And what I wanted to do was, again, attract people that maybe had an interest in this for, misunderstood reasons or kind of incorrect understanding of what was going on. But actually, the half of the course is about the history of witchcraft. It's about recognition of the factual side to the history, the factual side to the persecution, but then also the development of witchcraft and Wicca as well, but also the kind of underground nature of witchcraft that happened from the late 17th century until the mid 20th century. And really it was the mid 20th century and certain particular iconic books that came out that brought it back into the fold and meant that it wasn't so underground. And then the second part of it is talking about witchcraft today, but it's more about, as with all of the courses, it's presenting the facts. It's telling people exactly what it is, and so that they can go away then and hopefully be educated about it and kind of have a change of perspective of what's going on. For example, the second part of the course, there's a little bit of a discussion about the pentagram and the various forms of that, and of course people coming to the course with this perception of particular symbols being associated with Satanism. And it's getting to the root of those symbolic elements, of witchcraft, and it's separating fact from myth, and separating witchcraft from Satanism, and separating the symbols that are associated with witchcraft, that are associated with others or associated with Hollywood. So that's kind of the aim behind the courses.
That's wonderful, because I'll tell you right now, if I dance with the devil, it's because I want to, and I've danced with a few, but it's not because I do his bidding. That's
exactly.
And don't get me started on the pentagram, because I can do that for 20 minutes too. But that being said, there are some courses that are called short courses, which is some of the introductory courses. Are those maybe it's going to be expanded upon at some point if there's a certain amount of interest?
Yes. So this year anyway is a year where if people logged on to either the school or the Equid site that's associated with the School of Parapsychology, where you've got all the courses there presented, they log on now, they'll see a difference between now and then what they'll see in the fall, kind of October time, because this period of time this year is about developing the courses, presenting those which are more popular, but also expanding on some of those which have been popular. So the exorcism and possession one actually has probably been the most popular and most signed up to over the last couple of years. So it's kind of expanding on that, but actually making the education experience a little bit more immersive.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, there are lots of sources out there, lots of online education companies and individuals producing stuff where a lot of it is downloadable.
Yeah.
And that's it, just the material. There might be some interaction with the tutor, but that's it. But online learning now is so much more, and the technology's there to make it a lot more immersive. So even incorporating, although it's not VR, but incorporating aspects of that where you can, the same way that I do with some of the stuff I do at the university in terms of forensic science and criminal investigation, where you can get students logging in online and they can go into a crime scene, and move around a house where there's a crime scene online. Wow. That same sort of technology can be used in terms of some of these courses. And I don't want to reveal too much about what's going to happen, but it's that sort of immersion. Is that I feel there's a change that's needed with some of these courses, even though I'm very proud of them. It's more a case of, let's make the student the focus and give you more of an immersive experience rather than just download stuff and talk to me. So you'll see a definite step change over this year, and like I said, it's going to be a big kind of release again in October when you'll see a change to a lot of these courses.
That's going to be great. I mean, I've just from before and going in this week and having a look, it's a big difference than it was before. And so where can people find out about the school?
Well, the best place is to go to the Equid site, which is where you can sign up. That's the School of Parapsychology.equid, ECWID.com. So the School of Parapsychology.equid.com. That's one place to look, but also if people wanted to, they can easily find announcements about courses and courses that are opening on my Twitter page, which is at Ciaran O'Keeffe, but also there's a Twitter page for the school, which is Parapsych School, so PARAPSYCH School, Parapsych School.
And where can people find out about stuff going on out of the school, like with your coming events and things that you do, because you're still doing quite a lot of other things, so where can they get a handle on you?
Absolutely. So again, Twitter is one of the best places. So at Ciaran O'Keeffe is where a lot of the upcoming public investigations that I'm doing, and I've got loads with organisations like Spectacular and Pigs and in Guernsey in June, for example, and various haunted prisons over the next couple of months with Spectacular and that sort of thing. So head to Twitter at Ciaran O'Keeffe, or you can find me quite easily on Facebook, either Ciaran O'Keeffe or Dr. Ciaran O'Keeffe, and any of these events are posted on there.
Okay, great. All right, now we've got to go, but pinky swear to me that it's not going to be years before you come back, please.
Yes, let's not have a Skype-versary in another 11 years. Let's at least make it a lot shorter than that.
Yes, one of us might be senile by then.
It'll be me.
Well, you never know. But anyway, thanks. Hang on for a second when we go off the air. I've got something I want to talk to you about. Okay. And thank you. And thank everybody for coming in. It's really good to have people listening and reacting in the chat room and talking and asking questions. It's really great. So thank you, Ciaran. Thank you, listeners. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2019. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through incompetech.com.